House of the Dragon, with it premiering in like maybe a year and a half at this rate. We're well into 2021. Coronavirus is well into its way of being goning the fuck off, and filming shit is going to be well underway here, starting in, well, towards April. Really towards the end of this month and into March is what my sources are telling me, but they are building sets right now and finishing out the smaller casting. I think once they completely finish the casting, we'll get more of the main cast members, at least for the first season, because remember, this is a Game of Thrones successor show, and people die like fucking flies in the wind. But all that aside, I feel like we're going to start to get more of the secondary cast for the first season once they completely finish casting this show. Now, there is a theme with Game of Thrones, in that there are so many characters that play a part, albeit minor or major, and they die quickly, whatever, but there's so many different characters, the casting takes a long time, so they're probably still working on that, and that's why I started off with saying that we are going to be getting the Ramin Djawadi, who is the greatest music composer for a television series. He does amazing work on Westworld as well, and many other TV shows for HBO, but he is coming on to House of the Dragon, and this news comes from, now, for those who are unaware, if you're not subscribed to this channel and you don't know that I recently had a baby, I sort of come into these videos half asleep. I'm going to try to focus. I had some coffee. I had some alpha brain from On It. I'm going to try to focus. I'm going to try to get through this, but this might be, I don't know, 15 minutes or something, but it's going to be all one hot take. One take. All right, so the news is coming from Westeros.org. Which is Elio and Linda. They are co-authors to the A Song of Ice and Fire universe. George R. R. Martin, when he started writing, he met basically his biggest fans, and they knew more about his world than he did, it seemed at the time. And George basically ended up hiring them because his world is so vast, and we're about to see it on fucking screen. Oh my god, all my dreams are coming true. But I can't wait to have the expanded game. Like when I have more than just one series to talk about. Like, obviously, I can talk about the books and everything related to A Song of Ice and Fire, but when we have more than one series, I don't know, dreams do come true. But getting back on track here, basically, Elio and Linda, who run Westeros.org, if I'm not mistaken, they are co-authors to the Song of Ice and Fire universe because George's world is so vast. He forgets some of the names of the characters sometimes. Sometimes he contradicts himself, and he hired Elio and Linda to sort of fact-check him. But they basically are reporting that according to another source, Los Siete Reinos, they've learned that an online resume posted by Ramin Djawadi's representatives at the, I'm going to butcher this one, Gorfaine Schwartz, that's not that hard. Gorfaine Schwartz Agency shows that award-winning Game of Thrones and Westworld composer Ramin Djawadi is returning to Westeros to compose the soundtrack of the forthcoming House of the Dragon. This is the third major behind-the-scenes role being filled that we've learned of recently, after showrunner Ryan Condal revealed last month that the show had hired Jim Clay as a production designer and Jenny Tamimi as costume designer for production. Now, I'm not sure of the first fellow, which I'll do some research and probably put it down in the description who exactly Jim Clay is, but Jani Tamimi, if that name sounds familiar, it's because she did all of the costumes for Harry Potter. Now, if you remember my videos just sort of relating back to a video I did a few months ago, I mentioned that since they're going to be moving to the Warner Brothers studios, it seems to me as though with all of these dragons that are going to be, now House of the Dragon is basically during a Targaryen civil war. Now the Targaryens had a couple civil wars, meaning like different Targaryens who are all blood of the dragon fight each other for many stupid reasons. Mainly it's like who's got the strongest claim to the Iron Throne. But this civil war in particular is known as the Dance of the Dragons because the Targaryens were at their height of power. You could argue they were at their height of power during Aegon the Conqueror, when he managed to rile all of these wild kingdoms and bring them into one fold. Dorne wasn't brought in until later, but the fact that Aegon was able to do this, you could argue that that is when the Targaryens were truly at their power, had their most influence. And during Aegon's reign, when he was basically formatting the structure for the Targaryen dynasty, that is when you could argue back and forth, but basically the Dance of the Dragons, the House of the Dragon, is going to take place when the Targaryens have something like 20 different dragons. A lot of them are alive and healthy and full fucking grown, and there's male and there's females, and they're actually hatching dragons at Dragonstone. The Targaryen princes are at their height of influence, where every lord and lady in the Seven Kingdoms want to marry their children off to these people. They want to have ties to House Targaryen. It's not like in Game of Thrones, where the Mad King is mocked relentlessly, and Robert Baratheon made sure that he tried to rid the realm of basically his cousins, because Robert Baratheon's only claim to the Iron Throne is through his Targaryen grandmother, I believe. But it's at a different time period, and the fact that we're going to be seeing so many dragons on screen made me say that they're going to use the resources at the I don't even know what the fuck I just said there, but they're going to be using that Harry Potter studio Leavesden in the UK. They're going to be using all of their materials to make this show sort of work. The CGI and the production value is going to be a lot higher than Game of Thrones in the early seasons, and will likely eventually surpass Game of Thrones in the latter seasons, especially with all these fucking dragons. Particularly dragon deaths are going to be very expensive. So with that train of thought, I was thinking that they may hire, although I can't remember if I included this in the video, but they may hire some of the people that work at that WB Studios. And that Tamimi lady, she works for the Harry Potter, all of the movies, designed all the costumes. It gets me pretty excited. I kind of hoped they had brought on Joanna Clapton. She did the costumes for Game of Thrones. I think I said her name right. I always get her confused with Michelle Fairley. Michelle Fairley, I know is Cat, but I'm just saying, like I said, lack of sleep. Anyway, there is a few other news-worthy things for House of the Dragon that I wanted to talk about, but I'll save that for like a live stream where I can sort of converse back and forth with people in the chat, because that is more interesting to get other people's perspective on the news, because you kind of just like mention the news, mention my opinion, and then that's it. That's like the rest of the video. What I did want to wrap this video up is by explaining a little bit more, because I've seen in my comment section about people not really understanding why I compare Daemon to certain characters, and why I think just from reading the first couple, holy shit, what the fuck was that? But just from reading the first couple pages of A Rogue Prince, which is one of the many short stories that George has written about this era in Targaryen history, it lets you know that Daemon is got to be played by someone like Matt Smith, who has the fucking range. Because when you read about him instead of reading from his perspective, like you do in the Hedge Knight in the Sworn Shield, the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, Duncan Egg, which is going to be hopefully another prequel series that they're working on. I'm curious if one of the other news things that sort of came out was that they're working on a Game of Thrones animated feature, a miniseries, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I was thinking maybe with that co-alongsiding with, which is a word that I made up here on this channel, with that co-alongsiding with the Duncan Egg news, I thought maybe they'd be doing like an animated version of that. I don't know. I think the voice actors that they pick for that will be fucking superb. It'll be hard to cast someone for the role of Dunk. Not so much Egg, but for the role of Dunk, the dude is like almost 7 feet tall, so you got to be like a giant and a good actor, and you're going to be the lead for the entire run of this series. And it's, in my opinion, my favorite story in the Song of Ice and Fire universe, so it's going to most likely, sounding cocky as fuck here, but the fact that it's such a compelling story, it's going to translate into television even better, because it's definitely not going to come out until House of the Dragon has had a few seasons under its belt, and HBO and Warner Brothers and George R. Martin himself has had experience adapting his work. I wouldn't be surprised if they let Ryan Condal showrun that series as well, and it would just be hard to cast a Dunk. I don't know. Maybe they'll take the route of doing an animated feature. That animated feature does well, and then they decide to take it to a series. I don't know. But just expanding on why I compare Daemon, why I say Daemon is not only like Jaime Lannister and Oberyn Martell, but he's also like Tyrion Lannister. I think in particular, Gildane mentions that Daemon was equally light and equally dark. And even though he did a bunch of shitty things to his brother, the King Viserys, he still managed to have redeeming qualities that reminded Viserys of their youth, when Daemon was this, basically the ultimate awesome brother. He wanted to go out and go do shit. He wanted to be adventurous. He was a free spirit. That was admirable to Viserys because it's mentioned that Viserys while he had a lot of good qualities, Daemon was pretty much everything that he wasn't. Viserys didn't take an interest to going on hunts and being a knight and being like someone who played a part in tourneys and jousting and all that good shit, like good medieval manly shit. Viserys wasn't really like keen to that kind of shit. So he admired his brother's free spirit enough to want to do that. And Daemon was like, he was the most admired man of his time, but he was also the most reviled man at his time. So people fucking hated him. It depended on who you were. And it depended on most likely his interaction with either you know, the person who has the, interaction with him, whether you like him or not, or, people close to you, their interaction with him, whether they liked him or not. Because it sounds like Daemon is basically this person who's somewhat a good dude to people that can offer him a session or a position to advance in. But if you do something to piss him off, if you insult him, or if you maybe ultimately fuck over his role or his position in line to the Iron Throne or his house and House Targaryen itself and his brother Viserys and Rhaenyra, the realm's delight, as they put it, you're fucked and you got the dragon. But he's not quite as terrible as someone like I think Aegon Brightflame from Dunk and Egg from the first book, who's basically a piece of shit Targaryen prince who like when the saying goes, when the gods flip a coin, whether it lands on heads or tails, the Targaryen's going to be batshit crazy or somewhat of an honorable, chivalrous person. That seems like Daemon, the coin sort of landed halfway. It balanced right in the middle. He's like a two-face. So when I say, when I compare him to Tyrion, I'm not necessarily saying anyone who doesn't think he's anything like Tyrion is wrong. No, I'm saying I see aspects in Tyrion being like, the television version of Tyrion being like this mostly good person, right? You see him do a few snide things, but he's kind of in the gray, but not really. He sort of becomes an idiot for a while because the writers didn't really know what to do with him. You could blame the writers of the show, or you could blame George for not finishing the books. I don't care. The show's over, so there's no fixing it. We might as well accept it and move on and realize that it was the greatest series of all time. I mean, it won more awards than anything ever. It is the most popular fandom of anything ever. Debate me down in the comments section, motherfucker. Y'all will see once House of the Dragon comes out and all of these videos start getting millions and millions of views. No, I'm just kidding. But, so, yeah, I'm not saying that anyone who doesn't think he's anything like Tyrion is wrong, but I think he's like Tyrion because Tyrion in the books, they're my favorite chapters, so I reread them over and over again. And when you reread the chapters over and over again, you sort of start to pick up on things that you didn't pick up on before. Obviously, every time you read it, you pick up on something new, but it makes you overthink things. And when you overthink things and you're a classic overthinker like myself, you realize that you read into things too much, and you start to realize that maybe this person is linked to this other person because George describes them a certain way, or maybe this theory that you've had for a few chapters before because this character mentions it, you think that it means something that it actually doesn't. And there are channels here on YouTube that sort of thrive in that world of like make-believe. It's sort of like Inception. They're a dream inside of a dream. And I just sort of try to stray away from that because when you start to go down that path and then you realize how fun it is, and then you realize that you'll probably never get half of that on the show, you become jaded, biased, and all you do is shit on television. And you're like, fuck, I don't get it. I try to stay down the middle with everything. That's why I have a second channel called Down the Middle Podcast. I realize that they're two separate mediums. Books are meant to be read and enjoyed in private and quiet, and when you have some time for contemplation and thinking. Having a child, people always brag about when they have a baby, it changes you. It changes everything. But well, it really does. That's why they say it so much. I'm not saying it like it bragged me, but it changed me to realize it put things into focus. So when I do have time to myself, I actually prefer to read as opposed to cut on a movie. But when I'm taking care of my son and being a dad, I'd rather cut on a movie because I kind of just want noise. I want to be entertained. I don't want to have to think too much. What ends up happening is when I come off from reading and then I watch a movie, I overanalyze the fuck out of the movie because I'm like, why the fuck did they do that? And I realize that I can't enjoy it. So obviously with A Song of Ice and Fire, you kind of need to read it, understand it, reread it multiple times, understand it, but also realize that sometimes it's like the most obvious choice. And I can't think of what that literary turn of phrase is, so I'm going to look it up right now. Okay, Google, What's it called in literary terms when something is the most obvious choice or the easiest answer?
Here's a result from search.
It's like red herring or some shit. I mean, it's giving me this fucking... Oh, of course, it's allegory. Yeah, let's go through all of the fucking literary terms. I think it's a red herring, so let me go down to that. See if I'm right here. This is going to be left in. This is normally something that I would cut out, but I'm going to leave it in because, my son's grandmother is here, and my time to make a video was elongated, so I'm just leaving it all in there. But anyway, a red herring, yes, I was correct. It's basically a misleading clue. It's a trick to use by storytellers to keep their reading guessing about what's really going on. George uses this all the time. If George had a house in his own world and he didn't get to choose what his house's sigil would be, guess what the fuck Sir Hunts would make it? A red herring. But yeah, so anyway, I went way sidetracked there. Way sidetracked. So Tyrion, favorite character, like to reread his chapters a lot. The reason why I see him like Daemon. Okay. Daemon, because we don't read his inner thoughts like we do with Tyrion, Daenerys, Jon Snow, everybody's favorite characters, Davos. Since we don't get to read since we don't get to read his thoughts, we don't know truly what all facets of his character are. So it's sort of a guessing game until we get to see him on screen, which is what I can't fucking wait. I think Matt Smith is going to be the ultimate casting in that show. I think he's like Tyrion for the simple fact that because we don't know how Daemon truly is, and because so many people in the realm loved him, wanted to be him, wanted to suck his dragon semen out of his body. Since so many people wanted to do this to Daemon, but then you also had, on the other hand, he was a fucking dick, and so many people hated him, and so many people wanted to cut his balls off and stick a red-hot fire poker up his arse. He's a compelling character. Tyrion, the same could be said about him. And anyone that sort of gets in Tyrion's ways. What do you think Joffrey's inner thoughts are about Tyrion? Right? So the same thing about Daemon. If a character can inspire that sort of hate, but then also love, then, well, they've got to be a multifaceted... you can't really nail them down to one other type of character in history. It's just his basic description reads as Jaime Lannister or Oberyn Martell, right? As some dashing knight of the actual, like, not just Seven Kingdoms, but sort of comparing him to Oberyn, but of the world, right? So they're worldly, they're handsome. When they sort of get whatever they want, they maneuver themselves into positions of power in order to do things that others wouldn't be able to do. Maybe they advance themselves into positions that someone who was born in their same position wouldn't be able to do. It's their prowess that makes them who they are. So his generic description reads like this, yes, but the fact that, well, you could argue that Jaime inspires so many love and hate types of things, but we will see on screen. It's interesting when you have characters like Mushroom, who is sort of equated to the Suetonius version from Roman history, which is this historian who wrote about many different Caesars and their reigns. And his version of that history is salacious when compared to other Roman historians' versions of that same history. So George himself has compared Mushroom's testimony to sort of this Suetonius version of Roman history. And I think it's interesting, relating it back to Daemon, is we may explore further insight into Daemon's character through Mushroom at first. I feel like Daemon would be a character best brought in early on, obviously in the I guess I didn't say this, I didn't preface it by going down this thought train, but what I'm thinking is the best way to introduce Daemon into the show. So involving Mushroom and how we have that mystery of him like twisting events and how we don't really know how truly Daemon is in person. We're going to get to see him on screen. We'll get to see him as that version of Daemon. It would be interesting if they sort of had Mushroom talking about him to Rhaenyra. I had gotten some leaks that mentioned a conversation that Mushroom has with someone in the first season where they're talking about how technically Daemon fucked Alicent Hightower, and this is why Sir Otto Hightower doesn't like him. Well, I like that idea, and I sort of spun it around. What if I have this scene in my head of like Daemon showing up at the 5th year anniversary of Queen Alicent and King Viserys, Daemon's brother, and Daemon just sort of lands on this dragon, and he walks up and kneels and hands his brother his crown of stepstones, and he's like, I'm back, brother, I'm here to celebrate, and that's sort of where the show picks up. But it would be interesting if we got to hear other people talking about Daemon, so we got to realize that this is someone who is a mystery. We're kind of going to get to explore him on screen for the first time and get to see his POV like in live action. But at this point, I've been going for about 19 minutes. That's a good enough time for YouTube's algorithm. If you could please do me a massive favor, if you enjoy this content and you enjoy these videos and you want to see my smiley ugly mug, make sure you slap a like on this video. This like goes gonna be 420. This guy, look, he's a fucking murderer over here. Also, if you could please make sure you subscribe and then turn your notifications all the way on so that way you'll get an alert every single time I drop a video throughout the wait for House of the Dragon Season 1, throughout the wait for the Dunk and Egg prequel series, throughout the wait for the Robert's Rebellion prequel series, throughout the eventual Game of Thrones sequel movies that will be coming out. It's referred to on this channel, the wait for all of that shit is called the Long Night. So make sure you subscribe and turn your notifications on so you get alerts every single time I drop a video throughout this long night. And super special shout out to my Patreon family over on patreon.com/yourhuntreviews. And if you all watching are interested in joining, check out the link down below in the description or one of the links that's popped off during this video. I want to thank you all again so much for watching. My name's Mark, and it's been Sir Hunt's Review.